Good evening. I'm Heather Hiscox, and this is The National. Criminal indictments in Washington.
Mr. Manafort, did you collude with Russians? 2
Trump campaign advisors are charged with conspiracy and money laundering. A third pleads guilty to lying to the FBI.
Today's announcement has nothing to do with the president.
Alert, order.
The ethics watchdog says more cabinet ministers are using a loophole to keep control of their assets.
Why won't he just tell us who they are?
Wicked weather in central Canada, and yet another dire warning about the environment. Plus, a 24-carat fake. Now the Mint is investigating.
This might just be the tip of the iceberg.
For all the White House denials and deflections about collusion in the U.S. election campaign, the Russia investigation has taken its first real shots at the Trump administration. A pile of serious indictments and an admission of guilt. The biggest fish named today, former campaign manager Paul Manafort. He and an associate face a total of 12 charges, including conspiracy against the United States. And another campaign advisor has already pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. So how did the White House react to all of this, and what's next? We have extensive coverage tonight, beginning with Lindsay Duncombe.
The indictment against Paul Manafort reads like an episode of Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. Trump's former campaign manager accused of laundering millions, using the cash to buy homes, fancy SUVs, and clothing. The investigation alleges Manafort and his longtime associate Rick Gates made cash working for pro-Russian politicians in Ukraine, didn't pay taxes on it, then lied when the FBI came calling. The charges include conspiracy against the United States, conspiracy to launder money, and posing as an unregistered agent of a foreign principal. Both men pleaded not guilty today. Manafort's lawyer called the indictment ridiculous.
There is no evidence that Mr. Manafort or the Trump campaign colluded with the Russian government.
None of these charges is directly linked to the campaign, which Manafort ran for just 5 months, starting in March of 2016 and continuing through the pivotal weeks when Trump clinched the Republican nomination. The president's tweet was predictable. So, too, the White House response.
Today's announcement has nothing to do with the president, has nothing to do with the president's campaign.
But perhaps in anticipation of that dismissal, another development from Mueller's team, one few saw coming. Documents unsealed today show George Papadopoulos, a former foreign policy advisor to the campaign, seen here in a tweet from the president's Twitter feed, lied to the FBI. And what did he lie about? Contacts with Russia. What Papadopoulos initially concealed and later confessed, extensive contact with a professor in London who had ties to the Kremlin. At one point, the professor told Papadopoulos the Russians had dirt on Hillary Clinton, saying they have thousands of emails. Papadopoulos told the FBI how he shared his Russian contacts with the Trump campaign, including an unnamed high-ranking campaign official. Lawyers say releasing that information on the same day as the Manafort and Gates arrests sends a message.
It's a way of putting, I think, pressure on others who the grand jury is looking at, that, hey, we're serious about this, we're going to charge individuals.
The White House claim that Papadopoulos was a mere volunteer with no official role was contradicted by audio from the Washington Post, where Trump praises him by name in an editorial board.
George Papadopoulos. He's an oil and energy consultant, excellent guy.
On this whirlwind of a day, one takeaway: the charges against Manafort and Gates will take months at best to resolve. The White House says it expects the Mueller investigation to wrap up soon. It won't. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Washington.
Indeed, sorting through all of this will go on for some time, but it's also worth looking back at everything that's led us to this point. During the Republican nomination campaign, Trump needed someone who could help him get close to the party establishment. Enter veteran Republican strategist Paul Manafort, who became chairman and chief strategist. After Trump won the nomination in July, Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Manafort met with a Kremlin-connected Russian lawyer who allegedly promised them damaging information about Hillary Clinton. A month later, WikiLeaks released nearly 20,000 internal Democratic Party and Clinton campaign emails, prompting an FBI investigation. Soon after, Manafort quit as Trump's campaign chair amid reports that he received $12 million in undisclosed consulting payments in Ukraine. In May of this year, Robert S. Mueller was named special counsel to investigate the Trump campaign's possible collusion with Russia to influence the election. Manafort's home was later raided, and prosecutors warned they planned to indict him, which they have now done, along with his business associate Rick Gates, though the charges are unrelated to the investigation. But then today, the surprising guilty plea from George Papadopoulos, who has admitted to lying to the FBI about meetings he took with the Russians while serving as Trump's foreign policy advisor in 2016. Keith Bogue has been keenly watching all of the developments in Washington. What do you make of today's events, Keith?
Well, Heather, first and foremost, contrary to what the White House would have us believe, the Mueller investigation has not lost interest in Russian collusion, even though they've begun by charging Manafort and his associate with white-collar crimes such as tax evasion and money laundering. Those kinds of crimes are easier to prove with documentary evidence. You don't need a lot of witness testimony for them if you have bank records and so on. But once you've got that evidence, you can then leverage that to say, look, we've got a strong case. Now you tell us what you know. Now give us the kind of sworn testimony that isn't going to be found in documents. And so I think that's probably the way they are proceeding. The other important thing, of course, is that everything we found out in the plea agreement with George Papadopoulos indicates entirely that there's still the investigation is still interested in the collusion angle.
Well, let's talk about that in a little bit more detail, because here was the guilty plea, the plea deal that he cut, his former foreign policy advisor. That was the real surprise of the day. What made it so, and what is its particular significance?
Yeah, it was a big surprise, and that's part of the story. The plea deal that Papadopoulos made had been sealed since his guilty plea. That's for a number of weeks now, and it suggests that since the time that he was first arrested in July, he's actually been working with the FBI. In fact, they say that one of the reasons that they wanted the agreement sealed was to protect him so that he could serve as a proactive cooperator, which a lot of experts in the field believe can only mean that he was wired, wearing a microphone and recording conversations. So if there are people in the White House who have something to hide and have been talking to Papadopoulos, they're going to have a lot of sleepless nights as they wonder what he captured on tape. Of what they might have said to them.
Keith, thank you very much. Keith Bogue there in Washington. Today's developments make it a perfect time to call in our Washington insiders. Their take on the investigation and its ramifications coming up a little later. Finance Minister Bill Morneau has been raked over the coals in recent weeks because he didn't put his substantial assets into a blind trust when he moved from business into politics. Well, it turns out several other Liberal cabinet ministers are using the same loophole. Today's revelation from the Ethics Commissioner brought renewed attacks in the House and a tit-for-tat response from the Prime Minister. David Cochrane reports.
It's incredibly important to know who these cabinet ministers are.
After weeks of attacking Bill Morneau, the Conservatives went after his colleagues, following revelations that 3 or 4 more unnamed cabinet ministers don't have their assets in blind trusts either.
Like the finance minister, they could be profiting from investments and stocks while making decisions that could impact the value of their own assets. Now, if the Prime Minister is so sure and so proud that they're following all the rules, why won't he just tell us who they are?
Right, Honorable Prime Minister. And the mechanisms that the Finance Minister currently has in place are very similar to the mechanisms that the previous Conservative Finance Minister had in place.
Right there from the Prime Minister, you heard the beginning of the counterattack. The Liberals covering their assets by attacking the assets of Conservatives.
The former Finance Minister, Joe Oliver, was the sole owner of a corporation that held publicly traded securities.
The two finance ministers used similar structures, but with key differences. Joe Oliver owned a private company and also didn't use a blind trust. But Oliver's company owned pooled funds, which are like mutual funds and allowed under the Conflict of Interest Act. Bill Morneau's private company owns stock in his family company, a company that does some work in an industry he regulates, which is what has fueled the opposition attacks.
The finance minister is mired in an ethical cesspool of his own making, and he seems quite happy to remain there.
The finance minister, all ministers in this House, and ministers of the previous Conservative government follow the advice and the recommendations of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner.
As explanations go, the NDP says that's weak.
To say, well, Harper did it, so now Trudeau's going to do it? If that's their argument to Canadians, that is a revelation.
What the Conservatives call an ethical cesspool was signed off on by the Ethics Commissioner. That's why the NDP wants the rules themselves to go under the microscope. They've asked a parliamentary committee to study the conflict of interest laws and to recommend changes. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
The National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls moved to Nova Scotia today. This is its fourth stop after Whitehorse, Northern BC, and Winnipeg, and the final set of hearings before its interim report is published later this week. Today, one family told its story of loss and mistreatment. Tom Murphy has that tonight.
An ancestral fire burns in a teepee. Prayers are offered. A source of strength for those who will testify. The Saunders family would need it.
I was ashamed to be Inuk.
A shy mother thrust into the spotlight when her daughter Loretta Saunders went missing.
She had the best laugh. She had the best laugh.
A blonde-hair Inuk woman who didn't at first glance appear Indigenous, an honors degree student in Halifax, writing her thesis on missing and murdered women and girls. She was pregnant, excelling at school, and then she went missing.
I didn't realize how big of an issue it was until it happened to my family.
The fear that police won't take such a case seriously, a reality for so many families of the missing and murdered.
When my daughter first went missing, they had a white woman missing, and I started to clap because they called her white because I knew they were going to.
She thought they would help her.
I would call to the investigators, and they would answer me. I would talk personally to the investigators.
When a white woman goes missing, there's so much more effort put in. There's more public outcry.
Police arrested Loretta Saunders' killers, her own roommates, within days of her death.
I saw how her white passing privilege, it helped the situation.
I'm starting to see a lot of blessings since Loretta has gone home to heaven.
One of those blessings? A fire has now been sparked in Miriam Saunders to fight for her people. The anguished has turned activist.
I've been introduced as the quiet ones. Guess what? We're not quiet anymore. Thanks to my daughter. She left something in me that I will never let go. Never.
As more people line up to tell their stories, the Commission is looking for more time to hold similar hearings as the inquiry reaches a critical milestone, the release of its interim report on Wednesday. Tom Murphy, CBC News, Member 2 First Nation, Nova Scotia.
Coming up, a cautionary tale about posting reviews online. Plus, could this be a future Olympic sport? Not until one big question is answered.
Are you canoeing or are you surfing?
A severe weather system is blowing through eastern Canada, bringing fierce winds and heavy rain. This is what the Ottawa area looked like today. Stranded cars in knee-deep water. About 10 centimeters of rain fell between yesterday and this morning. That's more than the entire monthly average for October. In Quebec, wind gusts of 90 kilometers an hour uprooted trees and knocked down wires. Power was out to more than 200,000 homes and businesses. Tonight, parts of western Newfoundland are expecting wind gusts of up to 150 kilometers an hour. Scientists are sounding the alarm today about a record amount of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. The World Meteorological Organization says CO2 levels in 2016 rose at a record pace to a level not seen in 800,000 years. Researchers blame the spike on human activity and a strong El Niño
season. By changing
season.
this composition of the atmosphere, we have changed the climate, and we have seen not only warming, but we have seen changes in the rainfall patterns, drought, flooding.
The United Nations warns that at this rate, targets set just 2 years ago in Paris won't be enough, prompting calls for drastic action at a climate change conference in Bonn, Germany, next week. Later this week, our science correspondent Bob McDonnell will answer your questions on climate change. Tune in Friday night for a special edition of Ask Bob on The National. CBC News has learned the surprising frequency of state-sponsored cyber attacks on Canadian government computers. They number in the thousands. A new Public Safety Canada report says, for the most part, defenses are holding, but some attacks are getting through. Tom Perry has the details.
This study by Canada's Public Safety Department is a bit of a report card on the government's efforts to protect its computer networks. And like a report card, there are some good grades and there are some areas where there's room for improvement. Public Safety looks at what it calls state-sponsored cyber activities against Canadian government computer networks. In other words, foreign regimes trying to break into Canadian computers. The report says that between 2013 and 2015, there were, on average, more than 2,500 incidents per year of state-sponsored actors trying to breach the government's networks. Now, you do the math, that's about 50 attempts a week. The report says in 2015, only about 2% of those attempts were successful, but there's no mention really of how serious any of those breaches may have been. The report does say this 2% figure is actually down from earlier years. In 2013, it says about 6% of those attempts got through. Now, the report notes there are people in government saying there really should be a zero tolerance for these types of breaches, while there are others who say that it's impossible to stop them all. And just to give you an idea of how many attacks the government is dealing with, the Communications Security Establishment, it's taken a lead role in protecting the government's networks. It says it blocks hundreds of millions of attempts to find weaknesses in Ottawa's computer systems every day. It won't break down where they come from, but it says it does continue to see efforts by state-sponsored actors to access Government of Canada systems. Tom Perry, CBC News, Ottawa.
A U.S. federal judge has blocked Donald Trump's plan to ban transgender people from serving in the military. Trump had directed the military to stop accepting transgender recruits and to discharge those currently in the service by next March. Transgender service members called today's decision a win. The U.S. Justice Department says it is disappointed and will review the ruling. Controversial U.S. soldier Bo Bergdahl took the stand today at his own sentencing hearing. He offered an emotional apology to comrades wounded in the years-long search to find him after he walked away from his base in Afghanistan in 2009. Bergdahl was later captured by militants. He faces life in prison for desertion and misbehavior before the enemy. And U.S. military officials say they have caught another suspect in the deadly 2012 Benghazi attack. Navy SEALs captured Mustafa al-Imam during a raid in Libya. 4 Americans died in the attack on the U.S. diplomatic compound 5 years ago. The suspected mastermind of the attack is currently on trial in Washington. Civil servants in Catalonia were back at work today for the first time since Madrid seized control of the regional government over the weekend. Catalonia has been left in a limbo of sorts. Its parliament dissolved, future uncertain, and now Spain has announced charges against separatist leaders. Margaret Evans has the latest from Barcelona.
Barcelona streets are not as they should be, especially for the start of the week. Taxi driver Talad Kohli should know. He says Catalonia's crisis has businesses leaving and tourists starting to stay away.
Every day we are going down economically. We are losing so much money. Yeah, you can see this place normally is really busy.
This isn't just any workday. It's the first since Spain imposed direct rule on Catalonia over the weekend, leaving many civil servants bewildered. Susana Villacampa amongst them.
People from the Spanish government that want to come here to govern us, I think they are not going to have things easy.
Crowds of journalists and curiosity seekers gathered outside the seat of the Catalan regional government all day long.
A government that was, of course, fired en masse on Saturday. If we pan up to the top of the building, you will see that both flags, Spanish and Catalonian, are flying. But authorities in Madrid say, make no mistake, they're the ones who are now in charge.
Spain's state prosecutor made his move at a press conference in Madrid today,
En defensa de la legalidad.
announcing charges of rebellion, sedition, and misuse of funds against the main Catalan leaders. But as for the deposed Catalan president, Carles Puigdemont, well, they seek him here, they seek him there.
Where is Puigdemont?
Where is he?
Well, I don't know. I cannot confirm you where is the president. I think that president's office should say.
He's reportedly in Brussels, rumored to be speaking tomorrow. Meanwhile, the Spanish government moves ahead with its plans to hold new elections in Catalonia in December. But that doesn't mean the dream of independence will fade.
Maybe it's only the beginning, but I think something has changed for good.
Or maybe very little has changed at all. Two flags still flying over a disputed house. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Barcelona.
Straight ahead, the allegations against an Oscar-winning actor and why his apology has raised even more ire.
Rolling Stones fans were absolutely delighted with the judge's decision not to send their hero to jail. Noting that Keith Richards isn't your usual drug addict, the judge imposed an extraordinary sentence, including the obligation to give a special benefit concert for young people here in Toronto at the Canadian National Institute for the Blind.
I feel very good about it, obviously, yeah. I think it's fair, slightly strange.
Richards told the news conference that he wouldn't recommend the use of drugs, but he wasn't about to become a preacher.
I guess our music will reflect the any changes in attitude that are prevalent amongst society and amongst people. We can't do any more than that, you know.
Michael Vaughan was there to see Richards serve his sentence.
Only 9,000 tickets were available for the two concerts, and of those, nearly a third were given free of charge to blind people. Other rock fans, not to be denied, perhaps the only Rolling Stones concert of the year, eagerly paid $75 a ticket to scalpers. The performers are collecting no fees or travel expenses for these shows. However, rock concerts are expensive to stage, and the Canadian National Institute for the Blind expects to show little, if any, profit. For Keith Richards, these concerts were a condition of his probation and suspended sentence, resulting from a drug conviction recently in Toronto. But the Federal Department of Justice wants to appeal for a stiffer sentence for Richards, perhaps to send him to jail. There are plans for him to meet authorities tomorrow to be served with the official notice of that appeal.
The Quebec man at the center of an Amber Alert last month was charged today in the deaths of his girlfriend and an elderly man. Hugo Fredette faces a first-degree murder charge in connection with the death of Véronique Barbe. He's also been charged with second-degree murder relating to the death of Yvan Lacasse. Fredette was arrested after a 6-year-old boy went missing. The car he was driving at the time belonged to Lacasse. The 71-year-old's body was found days later. Kevin Spacey has apologized to an actor who accused him of sexual misconduct in the 1980s, but it's what Spacey announced at the same time that's stirring angry reaction. Anthony Rapp says when he was 14, Spacey made inappropriate advances towards him. In a statement, Spacey says he doesn't remember the encounter but apologized. He then revealed he's now choosing to live as a gay man. Backlash was swift. The president of the gay rights group GLAAD tweeted, "Coming out stories should not be used to deflect from allegations of sexual assault." Others go further, saying Kevin Spacey has set gay rights back 50 years by conflating homosexuality with pedophilia. And this exposes the gay community to a million tired old criticisms and conspiracies. Sued by a contractor, dumped by a doctor, denied a refund for a repair job that never happened. Some consumers who have vented online about their experiences are now facing negative consequences. And as Rosa Marcatelli found, they have very little legal protection.
Online reviews are what landed an Ontario couple in court after they posted about a bad experience they had with the contractor they hired. The contractor filed a $3 million defamation lawsuit. Go Public spoke with the man who posted the reviews on the popular home repair website HomeStars. Jeff Vary wants to warn others, but he's worried, telling us, "I'm concerned I might end up in court again, and I don't want to do that because I just went through a year and a half of hell."
I was shocked.
Nancy Peterson is the founder of HomeStars.
I have a real concern with it. You know, I think there should be freedom of speech and consumers have the right to their opinion.
According to court documents, the contractor filed 2 lawsuits against the couple, one for breach of contract and that $3 million defamation suit. The company alleging it suffered and continues to suffer a loss of reputation as a direct or indirect result of the couple's reviews. Reviews like Design Spec has unprofessional staff, and Design Spec did not take ownership or responsibility for its mistakes. Most of the other reviews for the company are excellent.
The couple struck a deal in the end, paying out more than $100,000 for supplies and labor the contractor already provided. And in exchange, that contractor dropped the $3 million defamation suit. Nothing was proven in court.
Jessica Trask was dumped by her doctor after posting a negative online review on ratemds.com.
I just wanted to get my experience with him out there.
An appliance repair company tried to stop Heather Hamilton from writing a review at all. It offered a partial refund after some problems, but only if she signed away her right to post anything online.
I think it's disgusting. We live in a world where this is what we have as consumers. We have our voices.
This lawyer says laws across the country need to be updated to protect a business's online reputation and avoid what she calls libel chill,
where the threat of lawsuit may prevent a consumer from speaking their mind.
Neither the companies nor the doctor involved in these cases would answer our questions. Rosa Marcatelli, CBC News, Calgary.
Wondering why the U.S. Special Prosecutor went after such a big fish today? Our Washington insiders on today's charges and leverage. Next on The National.
We just gave the blah blah.
This is Roger Tétrault. He's a Montreal bill collector. That's his job. He also holds news conferences. That's his hobby. Here's Tétrault 3 years ago, posing as the president of a fictional group called Water Aid for America, urging that Canada ship its water to the drought-stricken U.S. The national media gobbled it up.
Here is the CBC News. A group of Montreal residents wants to pressure the Canadian government into diverting water from the Great Lakes into the Mississippi River.
The French language network of the CBC believed Tétrault was also a nuclear expert. Here he is telling a national audience how the Chernobyl disaster could rain down assorted horrors on North Americans. The now defunct Montreal Daily News had him under another name, Tubal Cain, and yet another vocation. It's been going on for years. In 1971, the Montreal Star thought it had a scoop, an internal CIA memo outlining covert operations in Quebec. It even made The National on CBC.
Under a CIA letterhead, the document reads, "Subject, Quebec."
It was Tétrault's work, of course. Around the same time, he suckered the Toronto Star Weekly with a phony FLQ terrorist camp in the Laurentian Hills. I told myself, if they want fiction, I'll give them fiction. So I gave them fiction. Tétrault says there are many others like him, only nowadays they're known as media consultants and spin doctors.
Whoever's got an axe to grind, they give their spin to it, and they get into the media, and that's the story that goes out.
He's absolutely right. Governments, anybody who's covered governments or followed things they do, know that they engage in this, where you want to call them trial balloons or disinformation, they do it frequently.
Is Tetro's career as a hoaxer over? Perhaps. But he says he'll certainly keep trying, guided by the firm belief that there's a reporter born every minute.
He mouthed two words, the first word of which started with F and the second word of which started with O.
Well, it's a lie, because I didn't say anything.
Did you mouth it?
Did you mouth it? What does mouth mean? Move your lips. Yes, I move my lips.
And the words you've been quoted as saying?
No.
Did you intend to give
What did you
What
move
were
your
you
lips?
thinking when you moved your lips?
What is the nature of your thoughts, gentlemen, when you say fuddle-duddle or something like that? God, you...
Well, the big topic on Parliament Hill today wasn't the Constitution, it wasn't the economy, it was the Prime Minister and his language.
I heard him say very clearly, "F***ing bastard."
I convey to the Speaker my regrets for any inconvenience, and I convey to any honourable member of the House my regrets to them.
Just quieten down, baby.
Liberal Sheila Copps didn't think the remark was very funny.
I'm not his baby, and I'm nobody's baby, and I'd like him to withdraw those remarks.
The House is no stranger to heated exchanges, but few have been this heated or this strange.
For shame. No. I hear the word racist from that side. Do you have the fortitude or the gonads to stand up and come across here and say that to me, you son of a bitch? Come on.
Daryl.
Order. Order. Yes.
Stinson came within 3 meters of Liberal John Canis before returning to his seat.
It was too much for one Liberal MP.
I did not say fuddle-duddle. That was another generation.
I think that we've reached a point where this type of conduct, it's not only disgraceful, but it's unacceptable.
It may just be the beginning of charges laid in Robert Mueller's investigation. Donald Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, and his associate, Rick Gates, are under house arrest tonight. And former Trump foreign policy advisor, George Papadopoulos, has pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. It's definitely a day for our Washington Watch panel. And so with us tonight, the Boston Herald's Kimberly Atkins in Washington, and in New York, Philip Bump of the Washington Post. Thank you very much for being here after this extraordinary day. And Kimberly, let me begin with you. These indictments, nothing in the Manafort Gate indictments mentions Donald Trump, mentions the campaign, mentions the White House. So why has Robert Mueller started there with those?
Well, it seems that Robert Mueller is taking the approach of doing a rolling investigation. This isn't an investigation that's going to get to the end, and then we're going to find out what all the charges might be. He's going to file these charges when he has them. There was also some idea that there might have been some statute of limitation issues on some of these Manafort charges, but it's clear that this investigation is broad. It's not just limited to the campaign and campaign activities. It's limited to whatever potential crimes that they find. But it's also important to note that these may not be the only charges that Paul Manafort faces, and so they could be used as a crucial negotiating point if Mueller wants to get closer to what actually was happening within the campaign and try to push him to negotiate.
Pick up on that negotiating point, if you would, Philip. I heard legal experts today talking all about leverage. One actually said Manafort knows where the bodies are buried. So the strategy of starting there and where it might lead, what do you think in terms of Mueller's strategy?
Well, yeah, if we assume, for example, that there are bodies that are buried somewhere, that is to say, if we assume that there is some bigger picture, potentially collusion, if there is some bigger picture crime at stake here, by getting Paul Manafort indicted early, that gives Robert Mueller leverage in the sense that Manafort is a big fish. He was a campaign chairman. He was someone that had a high-ranking position with the Trump campaign, and he therefore could potentially be leveraged in order to provide testimony against someone else. If someone doesn't want Paul Manafort to go to trial. I mean, there are all these ways in which you might be able to use Manafort's indictment as a way of getting other people to say what they know. And if there are other things to be said, that's one reason why Manafort may have been targeted early.
And other areas about which to gain information, Philip, continue on, because, I mean, we don't know if Manafort will cooperate, but if he does, I would imagine that one of the things Mueller would want to ask about is that 2016 meeting that Donald Jr. set up, that Manafort was in attendance, that Jared was in attendance. On that particular event, what might he want to glean about from that?
In particular is something that has drawn a lot of attention ever since it was revealed earlier this year. And the question that is really inherent there is what did Paul Manafort and Jared Kushner, for example, know about the meeting before they went into it? Do they know that Donald Trump Jr. had a conversation with this guy, Emin Agalarov, who he had spoken with about there being this dirt on Hillary Clinton? At the meeting itself, it was reported that Manafort spent the whole time on his phone. That's what Donald Trump Jr. said. But then we found out that he actually had notes from the meeting, that he had actually been taking notes about what was being said there. Perhaps there's more to that picture than we know. I'll also point out that earlier this year, the Post reported that Manafort had sought to set up a private briefing for an oligarch named Oleg Deripaska, who he had long-standing business relationships, who came up very frequently in the indictment today. There may be more there. Manafort may have been trying to leverage his position to try and make good, as he said in an email, to debts that he owed Deripaska. There are all these ways in which Manafort, there could be more to the Manafort story that we don't yet know.
Kimberly, back to you on the other thing that happened today, and that was in many ways more surprising, and that was the guilty plea and the details of that plea deal that George Papadopoulos struck, his former foreign policy advisor. A lot of reporting and a lot of prosecutors and prosecutor types saying that he must have been wearing a wire. That's what we're getting from the documents. How does his guilty plea, how do the revelations, how do they all fit in with today?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the most interesting and surprising thing that we saw today, because it shows that this investigation is getting people to flip, getting people to cooperate with investigators in exchange for a more lenient deal if they too are facing charges. And the charges that Papadopoulos was facing was essentially lying to the FBI, nowhere near the kind of serious charges that Manafort is facing, but enough to get him to cooperate, to talk about these meetings, which is the closest, the most clear information that we've had so far of a connection between the campaign and Russian officials. So, and it is reported that one of the people that he spoke to about these potential trying to set up meetings with Russians was Manafort. And so this could implicate other people. It also shows, as we wait to see how this investigation touches people like Michael Flynn or Donald Trump Jr., the methods that Mueller is taking, clearly establishing evidence, having it in place, and having people who are willing to testify against other people.
You know, Donald Trump has always claimed this probe is a witch hunt, to use his phrase, and that there is no collusion with any Russian officials and no link to his campaign. So, Philip, what does this guilty plea, what does the Papadopoulos revelations, what does all of that do to those repeated claims?
Well, I think that Donald Trump has always had a sort of sliding scale interpretation of what collusion is, right? I mean, he said at the outset, there is no collusion, there's no evidence present to suggest that anyone colluded. Then it turns out that his son had bitten on this email where someone offered dirt on Hillary Clinton, and he sat down to meet with a Kremlin-linked lawyer. After that, Donald Trump still said, there's no collusion, that's just, you know, he's just doing Oppo research and yada, yada, yada. So Donald Trump has always made the same case, and I think that we can expect him to continue to make the same case no matter what develops. So I don't know that Donald Trump's position, his political stance on what his view of this investigation is, I don't think that's changed today, but I think he's probably very well aware today that any idea that Robert Mueller was going going to sort of sit on his hands and not necessarily dig too deep. If Donald Trump was hoping that would happen, I think that's gone out the window.
You know, we heard the same thing from the White House, from Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Kimberly, today. Similar messaging in that Papadopoulos, minor campaign volunteer. We've already heard her describe, or the White House described Manafort as a limited role for a limited period of time. And they were making that messaging very clear today in Donald Trump's own defense. I'm wondering, the fact that they moved so quickly to get rid of Manafort, distancing themselves from him early on, as soon as these European ties became public knowledge, does that give them a little bit of, well, does that help Donald Trump distance himself from Manafort today? Is this good news in all of that for him?
Yeah, I think it will be difficult for the White House and Donald Trump himself to message away potential problems if, in fact, Mueller has information and evidence linking them to potential ties with the Kremlin during the campaign. I think they're going to message. They want to have their base and give their base and give their allies talking points to say to the press and on social media. But at the end of the day, it depends on the evidence that Mueller has. And we don't know yet what, if any, evidence Mueller has directly connecting Donald Trump or the highest people in his campaign, aside from Manafort, to these potential ties with Russian operatives during the campaign. Mueller's going to reveal that, as we see from today. He'll reveal that on his own timeline when he thinks it's right to do so.
So, Philip, given that, I can probably anticipate the answer to the question. Is Donald Trump any closer to impeachment tonight, Philip?
I mean, that's a tough question, because impeachment it really has nothing to do with any of this. Impeachment is a political process, and you know, the House of Representatives is solidly controlled by Republicans. Republicans are not going to move on an impeachment of Donald Trump prior to the primaries next year for the midterm elections. After that, who knows? I mean, it depends on what's revealed. But I don't think that he moved any closer in impeachment simply because his party still stands by him. 78% of Republicans in the most recent weekly Gallup poll approve of the job that Donald Trump is doing. It's slipped a little bit, certainly, particularly since the beginning of his term. But Republicans still think he's doing a good job. They come out to vote, and so Republican members of Congress aren't going to move quickly to try and impeach him. No.
So, Kimberly, last word to you. Where does this go next?
We don't know yet. I mean, we do know that this is just the beginning of what could be a very long process. The White House was signaling today that this is near the end. I don't think that that's necessarily the case. This could go well into 2018, and we can see some of these indictments come down on a rolling basis. So I think there's a lot more that we don't know than what we know at this point.
Kimberly Atkins, Philip Bump, I appreciate your insights very much tonight. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Straight ahead, there's a battle underway for control of the world's fastest growing sport. We'll dive into that debate next on The National.
The television show that challenges all comers is still doing just that, 30 years on. Front Page Challenge is entering its 30th year of broadcasting in Canada. And last night, at a glittering reception in Ottawa, they remembered and they celebrated those memorable years. Dan Bjarnason has prepared this report.
Few Canadian institutions have lasted as long as Front Page Challenge. And to become more popular year after year is something to be envied.
That's the opinion of one viewer at least, expressed over a decade ago. And now, after 30 years on the air, the show's more of an institution than ever.
Tonight on Front Page Challenge.
Hammered out in 1957 in a producer's living room as a summer fill-in, and in a business where programs fight for breath and often die after a few weeks, Front Page Challenge is one of the most successful TV shows in history. The program developed the look of a miniature history of the 20th century. There was the silly...
let's talk about diamonds. That's a dull subject.
Let's not talk about diamonds.
Let me talk to you about your ex-husband, George Sanders. Are you still friends with him? Every time you speak about him...
Let's talk about diamonds.
There was the profound...
my whole Christian background had a great deal to do with my coming to this conclusion that love and nonviolence should be the regulating ideals in any struggle for human dignity.
Perhaps the show's chief drawing card was, until his death, an endearing scamp, Gordon Sinclair.
Did the personal event happening to you cause you to feel happy or joy or euphoric? Oop.
No euphoric. There wasn't an ounce of euphoric in it.
On occasion, the panel goofed on the obvious.
Well, let's see what's left. Mumbly peg, I guess that they don't do that anymore. Is this a sport where you run around? Is it boxing by any chance?
No.
No. Swimming.
Not once in 4 appearances did they manage to guess
Gordy Howe.
one of the original moderators 30 years ago. Alec Barris today is the program's writer. He recalls some early disasters, such as Winston Churchill's son, Randolph,
who was sort of 9 sheets in the wind by the time he got to the studio. Went to the wrong studio first, and when he finally got to the right studio, he insisted that somebody go out and get him a bottle of whiskey, which he killed before the show, and he didn't even need it.
Then there was the defecting Russian diplomat, Igor Gazanko.
And then when he came in, he insisted that he had to have his voice muffled so it wouldn't be recognizable. B, he had to wear the hood over his face so he wouldn't be recognized. But the funny part came in when he saw that Fred Davis was in the makeup room getting makeup on. He insisted he had to have makeup on, too, even though he was going to wear the hood.
It's hard to imagine now, but the critics panned the show opening night 30 years ago. A corpse, they called it. A long 30 minutes. The critics were wrong. Last night, the taping of a 1-hour birthday spectacular. Critics had also predicted that Front Page Challenge wouldn't last after Gordon Sinclair. The critics were wrong again. Dan Bjarnason, CBC News, Ottawa.
You want a vacation?
Never been to Italy.
You want to go?
Don't know, never really think about. What we even do? Maybe 5 days in Venice, coffee in St. Mark's Square, overnight in Siena, and drive down Amalfi Coast in convertible.
I feel like you think about this.
Are you canoeing or are you surfing?
I think you really have to be doing both, otherwise you're not going to get the most out of the board.
To me, it depends on the day.
Neither. I'm just trying to stay up on the water, and I'm trying to keep up with those guys.
If you've been at a lake or by the ocean in the last few years, chances are you've seen someone doing this. Stand-up paddleboarding. It's become a hugely popular sport among both recreational users and competitive athletes. It's even under consideration as an Olympic event. But these are turbulent waters, and they're putting the very future of the sport at risk.
It's just amazing sport, and I recommend it for everyone that I actually encounter. I'm 47, it still keeps me in shape, and this is what's important.
I love the glide in stand-up paddleboarding. So it's again back to that surfing, but the feeling of being able to float on water.
Harry Kane is going to give Canada an Olympic gold medal, and it's a special moment, I'm sure, for you, John. 1 minute 56 seconds.
In 2010, a friend really coerced me to stand up on a paddleboard. And I wasn't really interested in it at first because I thought it was time to grow up and not acquire new paddling toys. So I entered my first race in January 2011 in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, and I won. And that just got me addicted. And since then, I've been paddling pretty much every day. In the last 2 years, every day, year-round, basically. Being someone who comes from a canoeing background and then is now really involved in stand-up paddling, it's not only do I race and enjoy doing it, but I have a business that's based on it. I care about both. And my feelings really are that I think that the International Canoe Federation should probably stick to managing canoe and kayak. And at the same time, the International Surfing Association took on paddleboarding when no one else seemed to be interested in it. So I think they could lay claim to it in that regard. I think they've made an effort to be involved, and advance the sport for quite a while, and the ICF hasn't.
Are you canoeing or are you surfing?
I think you really have to be doing both, otherwise you're not going to get the most out of the board. I mean, it's partly technical, but it's also feel.
To me, it depends on the day. If it's a flat water type paddle, you are paddling. You have a paddle in your hands. However, you are standing on a board, which is similar to a surfboard. So if the conditions change and you're downwinding or you are surfing larger swells, you are indeed surfing.
Neither. I'm just trying to stay up on the water, and I'm trying to keep up with those guys because they push me. So yeah, so I'm not really canoeing and I'm not really surfing.
This is a surfboard with a paddle. It's not a canoe that's been adapted to surfing. It's not standing up in a canoe, it's paddling with a surfboard.
I totally came from a surfing background. So I'm always trying to do a little bit of surfing the waves, even the tiny bumps out there, even on flat water.
How can it be surfing? You're making a paddle stroke. You must be canoeing.
Well, the board is designed to be able to catch waves in the shape of it, the fact that we have the fin out the back just like a surfboard, and even the way that we ride when we're moving around, we get into our surf stance. So how can that not be surfing?
Well, in one respect, it doesn't really matter who governs it because I'm still going to be going out there and enjoying the sport, as will virtually everybody else. You don't need rules, and you don't need people telling you what to do, and you don't need any of that kind of thing to drive your board down to the water, take it off the car, drop it in the water, and go out for a paddle. So I would suspect that people are going to enjoy the sport regardless of who wins. They have an obligation and a responsibility to promote the sport and help it grow, to really share it with as many people as possible, because it is a wonderful activity and it'd be great for everybody if more people were doing it.
All that glitters is not gold. That story next on The National.
All right, okay, you got it. Move it. Woo! Yeah. And here we go. It's front. And front. And front. Yeah. Take it back. And back. Yeah. You just get my booty down. And again.
At 39 years old, Judy Shepherd-Missett is an excellent advertisement for jazzercise. 5'8", 115 pounds. She has 2 kids, one 15 years old, the other 10 months old. She works 18-hour days and she loves it. And her enthusiasm is infectious.
And we have about 350,000 students around the world, in Canada, of course, and the States, and 15 other countries. Jazzercise is really dance technique based, jazz dance technique based. It's very simple and easy to follow. If you can follow the leader, you can jazzercise. We also create in class a very theatrical atmosphere. Lots of whooping and hollering and singing along with the music. It's a very good emotional release. Be the actor, be the actress, be the dancer that you've always wanted to be, and just let your mind go on vacation.
Judy Missett started jazzercise long before the current fitness boom.
It all started with me back in 1969 in a dance studio in Chicago. And I saw a lot of people coming through my class, a jazz dance class, that weren't staying. And I attributed that to the fact that dance is a very disciplined, very restricted art form. And many were there just to get fit and to have fun and feel the joy of movement. I turned people away from the mirrors. I was indeed their mirror. I gave them lots of positive encouragement and made the movements very simple and easy to follow, yet still with the feeling of dance, and it worked.
Until 1977, jazzercise was a one-woman operation. Then Judy Missett trained some instructors, and the growth started happening. Jazzercise came to Canada in 1980 with Lynn Morgan, and now 11,000 students in the Vancouver area are dancing to the jazzercise beat.
It's for every type of person, young, old, of fit condition, of non-fit condition, dancers and non-dancers. People who want to be active, who like to dance, whose husbands may not take them dancing, and they have a good time while they're in class as well as getting fit.
The program is physiologically sound, so we don't ask people to do something stupid. We ask people to do things that are good for their body.
CBC Music presents the Canadian Music Class Challenge. Teachers, go to cbcmusic.ca/music class and upload your students playing a selected song to enter.
Turns out all that glitters isn't always gold. An Ottawa jeweler has found that out the hard way. He purchased what he thought was a gold bar produced by the Royal Canadian Mint. But as Stu Mills now tells us, it's proved to be a 24-carat fake.
Dennis Barnard has been making jewelry for 30 years. He'd never seen a bar of pure gold he wasn't able to roll flat in his jeweler's mill.
And he went through like halfway. And yeah, it was so hard, I thought, age is catching up. I thought to call Sam to come and give me a hand.
He got the wafer started, but then what was supposed to be 99% pure gold from the mint jammed.
So I put in the vise and it snapped.
CBC News took the metal to an expert who compared a bar of known pure 24-karat gold with the counterfeit bar.
There is no gold whatsoever. It's not made of gold.
If somebody is able to somehow get counterfeit gold into the system, it's a serious problem.
William Rentz teaches investment at Telfer School of Management. He says most bars of pure gold sit in safety deposit boxes or under mattresses. So if someone has fake gold, it may never be detected.
A currency counterfeiter doesn't make one fake $50 bill. They make a whole lot of them. So I would suspect that this might just be the tip of the iceberg.
Back at the jewelry store, co-owner Sam Tang says if there are many fakes in circulation, jewelers will likely spot them. But he too worries about the authenticity of gold bars purchased as investments.
So who's going to make sure those are real?
RBC has given the buyer a refund. The Royal Canadian Mint says the bar isn't theirs and they're in touch with police about the incident. Tang says he won't be buying gold from RBC until he has some answers. Stu Mills, CBC News, Ottawa.
Before we go tonight, a quick recap of our top stories, starting in Washington, where former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort is under house arrest tonight, as is his business associate, Rick Gates. They're the first people charged in the investigation into Russian collusion in last year's U.S. election. Both men pleaded not guilty today, but a third man, former Trump foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos, has pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. There are reports he's cooperating with investigators.
It's incredibly important to know who these cabinet ministers are.
First, it was Finance Minister Bill Morneau. Now, the Conservative opposition is going after his colleagues after the Ethics Commissioner said 3 or 4 other Trudeau cabinet ministers have also failed to set up blind trusts for their assets. The Prime Minister refused to say who they are.
Thanks to my daughter, she left something in me that I will never let go.
The family of an Inuk woman killed 3 years ago told a heartbreaking story today. It happened at the latest hearing for the inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Loretta Saunders moved from Labrador to Halifax to attend university. She was murdered by her own roommates, who were arrested within days of her death. The commission is expected to publish an interim report this week. That's the National for this Monday night. For news at any hour, you can always go to cbcnews.ca. I'm Heather Hiscox. Thanks for watching.